You ever have one of those mornings where the universe just dares you to lose your mind? That was me standing knee-deep in fresh concrete when Margaret Lanning, the infamous tyrant of our HOA, marched right up and tried to rip my entire life's work out from under me, screaming, "This land belongs to us. If you don't stop right now, we will sue." Her face was so red I thought she'd pass out before the second threat, and all I could think was, here we go again. Except this time I was ready. See, that day wasn't just about concrete and blueprints. It was the day the whole neighborhood, the lawyer, and even the folks recording from their porches saw me reach in my pocket and pull out the one thing they never expected. Not just the deed, but the kind of evidence that cracks open the ground beneath even the most ironclad HOA. That envelope wasn't just paper. It was the beginning of the end for Margaret's reign. Now let me back up a sec. The sun was barely up the lake, throwing off mist, my boots crusted with cement dust. I'd been hustling since 5:30 to get that foundation poured before the heat, the smell of pine and wet earth mixing with adrenaline. Every permit in order, every inch measured, or so I thought, till the sound of Margaret's heels on asphalt broke the calm. She popped out of that black Mercedes with hair sprayed like a helmet backup crew of angry neighbors in tow and marched right up like she owned the sky. "Stop this illegal construction!" she barked, voice sharp enough to slice concrete. 7 years she'd run this HOA like her own little dictatorship, and every bit of her said, "I win." I tried to reason with her, showed her my permits even, but she smacked my phone right into the wet concrete gasps all around. "Your little papers mean nothing when they violate our community standards," she hissed. Underneath that expensive perfume, I caught something sour, desperate, and right then she lost it. Margaret lunged, tore up my blueprints, scattered them like confetti in the cement, and screamed to the crowd, "He's a fraud!" Her mask slipped. The whole neighborhood saw it. Just as things hit fever pitch, a sleek black Lexus rolled up out. Came Richard Blackstone, HOA lawyer shark in a suit, eyes cold as a dead lake. The moment he showed Margaret, squared her shoulders, crowd doubled, phones everywhere. This was more than a morning spat. It was a showdown. But the real twist, I pulled out that manila envelope. The tension in the air was so thick you could scoop it. "This," I said, "doesn't just prove I own this land. It proves Margaret's been lying to all of you for 5 years." Blackstone paled. Margaret wilted. That envelope wasn't just a deed, it was the first domino. 10 years back, my grandma Eleanor Pierce died right in the little cabin by the lake. She was the one who bought this patch of earth in '87, back when it was still wild before the HOA built its walls. She always told me, "Logan, this land has stories to tell. Listen before you build." She never signed their covenant, kept every threat and demand in a notebook. Turns out Grandma's record-keeping would be what brought Margaret down. Margaret's not always been this way. Divorce in 2016, lost custody, lost control, found it again in the HOA. Turned those board meetings into trials, fined people for mailbox colors, flowers, anything she didn't like. Hired Blackstone as her enforcer, and suddenly the whole neighborhood tiptoed in fear. That afternoon, I took a hard look at the no construction sign she'd put on my gate. Didn't take a computer genius to spot the forgeries, fake fonts, blurry seals, bogus codes. Margaret's Photoshop skills, honestly, pretty sad for someone so obsessed with power. Then I got the message. Saw what happened. "Meet me at Brewster's Coffee," signed Beth. She was a retired librarian, said she was friends with my grandma. She showed up, handed me a folder thick with receipts and signatures, Margaret's signature from years of local purchases, proof she'd lied and covered her tracks. Then Beth said, "There's more." She'd recorded Margaret trying to buy her silence back in 2018, and Margaret admitted on tape she knew my lot was outside the HOA. We found an old radio podcast, too, Margaret herself saying Lot 76 is unrestricted land. That audio, I posted it, and the neighborhood exploded. By morning, Margaret was in panic mode. She called fake sweet and invited me to her house to resolve things. I went. Place was spotless, museum clean office lined with monitors and files. She tried to record me, but I saw the blinking red light, so I knocked my water over by accident, watched her scramble to save the tape while I started recording myself. She slipped, bragged about making sure the city retroactively banned my build, basically confessed to bribery and targeting my property out loud. The next day, retaliation came fast. City inspectors, environmental officers, all at once, all quoting anonymous tips about violations. Margaret watched from the curb, satisfied. Then came the letters, the social shunning contracts canceled with my firm, neighbors crossing the street to avoid me. And that night, someone went through my trash, left a note, "Smart people know when to quit." If that was supposed to scare me, it just proved I was right over the target. That's when I met Detective Sarah Torres in Oak Hill Park late at night. Metro PD Financial Crimes. She'd been watching Margaret, waiting for someone to push her into a mistake. Turns out my battle was bigger than zoning. Margaret had been stealing from HOA funds, laundering through fake companies, bribing city officials, and it didn't stop with her. Torres gave me a secure phone, told me to keep pressing, make Margaret panic, and keep collecting proof. Meanwhile, Beth found records of Margaret stealing from every HOA fund you could imagine, landscaping, road repairs, even the pet beautification fund. I dug deeper and found the old land survey from '87 signed by my grandma, GPS-locked boundaries, showing my property was never under HOA control. That tree Grandma loved officially protected outside their reach. All of Margaret's fines, threats, everything completely illegal. The community started to turn. People formed groups, shared stories, dug up more evidence. Dr. Henley, a retired professor, crunched the numbers. Margaret's embezzlement was huge, and Blackstone's law firm had made a fortune off fake violations. Margaret got sloppy, started surveilling her own neighbors, leaving a trail of paranoia and chaos. The big night arrived. The HOA meeting moved to the high school auditorium, news cameras rolling, hundreds of people. Margaret tried to play the martyr, but then we dropped the evidence, forged signs, the audio clips, the bank records. Beth, Dr. Henley, even Margaret's old secretary Linda came forward with a USB full of emails, bank statements, and Margaret's own diary, all outlining years of scams and intimidation. Margaret unraveled right there on stage, screaming, crying, lunging at the screen. Security had to escort her out. The board quit. The HOA collapsed. A week later, Margaret was arrested on 17 felony counts. Blackstone's law license was pulled, and the community finally breathed free air. The aftermath. Margaret's house and cars seized, every penny tracked, and returned surplus going to real community projects. Beth took over as interim president. First thing she did was dissolve the enforcement committees, rewrite the charter to protect homeowners, make all meetings transparent. The mural students painted, "When power corrupts, communities resist," still stands today, a beacon for anyone who's ever been bullied by a petty tyrant. And me, I finished that house, windows wide open to the lake porch, big enough for every neighbor who'd once been too afraid to speak. 6 months later, over 200 folks showed up for the housewarming. Even Detective Torres gave Beth my grandma's old land survey, framed as a reminder that documentation and backbone wins the long game. Margaret, she's doing time. And last I heard, she's running the law library for her fellow inmates, maybe finally learning what justice looks like. So let me ask you, what would you do if someone like Margaret tried to take what's rightfully yours? If you've ever fought back against a bully or wanted to share your story in the comments. Because if my grandmother taught me anything, it's that the strongest foundations aren't concrete or steel, but truth, community, and the courage to say, this land belongs to us, and we're not going anywhere. If you believe in justice and standing up for what's right, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories, where the good guys win sometimes with a little help from Grandma.